You have been lied to your entire life about this. Not deliberately, not maliciously, but the image you have of ancient human life, short, brutal, painful, over by 35, is almost completely wrong, and the truth is stranger and more unsettling than the lie ever was. Here is what you were taught. Ancient humans lived to about 35, maybe 40 if they were lucky. Life was nasty, brutish, and short. They spent their brief years running from predators, starving through winters, dying from infections that a single antibiotic would cure today. That image is so embedded in how we think about human history that almost nobody questions it. It is also based on a statistical error so fundamental that it changes everything. Let's go back to the beginning. When researchers first started studying ancient human remains, they did something that seemed perfectly reasonable. They calculated the average lifespan. They added up all the ages at death and divided by the number of skeletons. The number they got was around 35, and they stopped there. What they did not account for was infant mortality. In a hunter-gatherer camp, roughly 40 to 50% of all children died before the age of 15, not from violence, not from predators, from infections, from accidents, from the simple, brutal lottery of childhood before medicine existed. When you average those deaths into your calculation, you get a number that looks like 35. But that number does not tell you how long adults lived. It tells you how dangerous it was to be a child. Pull out the childhood deaths, and something completely different appears. A hunter-gatherer who survived to adulthood, who made it past the age of 15, had a reasonable chance of living into their 60s, some into their 70s, a few beyond that. We know this because they are still here. Right now in northern Tanzania, the Hadza people are living the same way every human lived for 300,000 years. Researchers who have studied them for decades have documented men and women in their 60s and 70s who are still walking 10 miles a day, still hunting, still gathering, still fully functional members of their community. And researchers studying groups from the Kalahari Desert to the Bolivian Amazon kept finding the same result. Survive childhood and you have a real shot at old age. But here is where it gets genuinely strange. Because it was not just that ancient humans could live long lives, it was how they lived them. In 2017, a team of researchers published a study on a group of people in the Bolivian Amazon living almost entirely outside of modern medicine. They hunt, they fish, they farm small plots of land, they have almost no access to processed food. The researchers scanned their hearts. What they found stopped the medical community cold. These people had the healthiest cardiovascular systems ever recorded in any population on Earth. An 80-year-old man had the heart health of a 50-year-old American. Their arteries showed almost zero calcification. Their inflammation levels were a fraction of what is considered normal in the developed world. The lead researcher called it the most important finding in preventive cardiology in decades. These were not people with access to statins or blood pressure medication or any of the interventions modern medicine uses to keep hearts working. They were people who moved constantly, ate whole foods, slept when it was dark, and lived in tight social groups they had known their entire lives. And their bodies reflected it. Now compare that to this. The average person in the modern developed world will develop cardiovascular disease. Not might, will. It is the leading cause of death globally. It kills more people than all cancers combined. And it is almost entirely a product of the way we live now. We have longer maximum lifespans than ancient humans. We have vaccines and antibiotics and surgical interventions that would seem like magic to anyone who lived before 1900. But we are also sicker in ways our ancestors simply were not. Here is the part nobody talks about. Ancient humans did not just live differently, they aged differently. A 60-year-old woman in a hunter-gatherer camp is not the equivalent of a 60-year-old in a modern city. She has walked tens of thousands of miles. She has lifted and carried and dug and climbed every single day of her life. Her bones are denser. Her muscles are more developed. Her balance is better. Her resting heart rate is lower. She is 60 in years. In biological terms, she is something closer to 45. Modern humans have invented a kind of aging that ancient humans never experienced. The slow deterioration that comes from sitting in chairs, eating processed food, sleeping badly, spending days without sunlight or significant physical effort. We call it normal aging. It is not normal. It is the product of a specific way of living that has existed for about 200 years. And ancient humans had something else we have largely lost, a reason to keep going. In a hunter-gatherer camp, an elderly person is not a burden. They are the most valuable member of the group. They know where the water is when the dry season comes. They know which plants are safe in which seasons. They know the history of every family in every camp within a week's walk. Anthropologists call this the grandmother hypothesis. The idea that humans are the only primate species whose females live for decades past reproductive age, because those extra years of knowledge and labor made the whole group more likely to survive. Grandmothers in hunter-gatherer societies are not retired. They are working harder than almost anyone, and the data shows that the grandchildren of active grandmothers are measurably more likely to survive to adulthood. Evolution kept old people alive because old people were useful. In the modern world, we have built a system that does the opposite. We remove elderly people from the productive life of their communities. We put them in separate buildings, we visit occasionally, we call it care, and then we wonder why rates of depression and cognitive decline among the elderly are so high. The brain, like the body, needs a reason to keep functioning. So what is the actual answer? How long did ancient humans live? If you were born in a hunter-gatherer camp 50,000 years ago, and you survived childhood, which was far from guaranteed, you might live to 65, maybe 70, in a body that was in better physical condition than most 40-year-olds today, doing meaningful work, surrounded by people who had known you your entire life, with a role that made you indispensable until the day you died. You would not have lived as long as the maximum human lifespan allows today. You would not have had the interventions that save lives after they begin to fail. But you would have spent far fewer of your years being sick in the specific ways we are sick now. We gained decades at the edges of life. We lost something in the middle of it. The elder walking through the forest at 75 with the heart of a 50-year-old is not living a worse life than the person in a managed care facility at 75 watching television. He is living a different life, one that the human body was built for over 300,000 years. And the uncomfortable question, the one the data keeps pushing toward whether we want to look at it or not, is whether the extra years we gained are worth what we traded to get them. That is not a question science can answer. It is the one you have to.